Hey guys and gals, just a reminder that I Know This Guy relies on your support. If you feel so inclined, you can check out our merch. I finally got the dog bibs up, so make sure to check them out. This podcast has taught me anything, it's that life's about those small victories. If you have enough dog bibs already, you can simply share the podcast with your friends. Every little bit helps us grow our audience. That's enough of me and the crazy jazz music you're hearing. Now for the rest of the show.
That there are things that I have access to, stories and little tidbits that we could put into programs like this, not as propaganda, but as saying, hey, I just want you to stop and think. And look, you might disagree with me after you stop and think, but I just want you to stop and think.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of I Know This Guy, the podcast where we dive deep into the lives of some of the most interesting people I know. Before we get started, please like and subscribe to I Know This Guy wherever you get your podcasts. By the way, my kids want me to say something about ringing a bell. What the hell's a bell? Let's talk about your quote. I know you already brought it up, but tell us a bit more about the quote.
Certainly in the last 3 years. And it's called Chapter 2 and You're Allowed. And I've been asked to speak a lot. I mean, I get asked to speak because I'm sort of like, the unicorn, right? I'm probably what used to be, I was one of the only women on stage. Certainly 20 years older than, literally, I don't know, do you remember when we were at that one conference and the speaker before me said that the next speaker was his mother's age, which was, and remember he did a backflip to get on the stage.
Oh yeah,
just to show how young he was. And then I think it was his friend of his girlfriend's or something, and she comes up to me and and this is a big e-commerce comment, but she says, "Do you want to outsource your backflip? I'll pretend to be you," because she had brown curly hair, and so we thought we could like maybe run real fast and fool people into thinking that I had in fact the girl who could not do a cartwheel in the 5th grade and still to this day will not even attempt one. So I was sort of an anomaly speaking. And then I started to get like these side speaking where it's like, oh, I heard you speak. Will you come to my church? Will you come to my women's group? Will you? And I think what resonated with people is that I had no idea that online world existed when I went to school, right? Number one, because the online world didn't exist when I went to school. So I literally had a guy I was working with say, don't you wish you would discover this when you were 17? He's like 24. And I'm like, when I was 17, this was not discovered yet. Not even by Al Gore, who had, invented the internet, right?
He invented the internet a few years later, didn't he?
Yeah, a few years later. Yeah. So it was a revelation to me that we were taught. I was the daughter of first generation immigrants, right? Who my father fought in World War II. My parents were older, even for my age, my parents were older than my set. And what you did was you went to grade school, high school, college, and then some professional school, and then you worked. And that was it. There was no or this. The only or this was, do you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or something, right? It wasn't, do you want to learn how to say, it wasn't even like conceived of that there could be this entrepreneurial journey. Like maybe when you retired, you could buy a franchise. And that was considered like incredibly entrepreneurial, right? So I wanted to be a voice to tell people that, and this is what I think was resonating and why I was going to these church and women's groups, was to say, look, number one, this is an option. And number two, especially for those of you out here, if I'm in a room full of women and I say, how many of you are in a job you believe you're calling? Or have a hobby or something that takes the majority of your time that you believe is a calling? I'll get 3/4 of the hands up. And I'll say, how many of you would have a little bit of guilt just leaving that job? Forget for whatever reason, like you win the lottery, whatever, just you'd have guilt leaving that job. And those same hands stay up except for maybe one or two, right? Who just had a fight with their boss or something. And no one gave us permission. No one gave us permission as women. No one gave us permission as professionals to come into this online world. And I sort of want, I don't want to have the arrogance of saying I'm giving you permission, because it was very funny that this priest person gave me the permission to leave my lawyer job, which didn't make any sense. But the idea was, look, God's not mad at me. He's going to be fine with you. Right? And that's sort of what I want to convey. Like, you can do this and, do it the way I did. Transition. I used to get off of work and go to my WeWork office to learn. I mean, I was getting into this in 2009 and 2010. And really in 2014 and 15, when I was selling on Amazon a lot, and even when I was traveling and going to China, I was still a public defender. I was still, that was my vacation, was taking those trips to China. And then I would go to WeWork and I'd work on it at night. And so I sort of transitioned into it till I got to the point where I believed I could, do this. And it was really a money-making opportunity and not, we were, this is like a Nigerian, insurance scam or kidnapping scam. Like we didn't know. And it's funny because what I sell online now, the niche I'm in, is aimed at women over 45. And I see a lot of men who want to sell to this niche because those are who buy things online, by the way, is women over 45. And they're getting a lot of refunds and arguments. And what you have to understand is they didn't grow up with the internet. You have to reassure them that this is not a scam, that I'm not taking your credit card and it's going to wind up stealing your entire identity and your everything about it, And so the same way that we as consumers are wary of that, we as women of that age are wary of, really, you can make money online? I mean, isn't this kind of like Bitcoin? I mean, like, for instance, even Bitcoin. I mean, you look at Bitcoin 10 years ago versus now. And then in 10 years from now, where will it be in terms of people's trust factor? And, so that's what I say. It's called Chapter 2. And it doesn't have to be selling online. Let's say you're a nurse and what you've always wanted to do is be a gardener or own a nursery. Do it. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. Do it. And it's not even about like following. It's like, if that's your passion, that's your passion. It's not just money. It's like, for me, this is not about my passion. My passion is helping people. My passion's always been helping people. This is a means to an end for me. I sell things I'm not passionate about, but I'm passionate about the freedom that it gives me. And you may not care about the freedom or the money, because let's say you might be in a position where, and it may even be that you're a housewife who volunteers at the church, and who would take over that volunteer thing if you wanted to go and open a nursery or you wanted to go and learn a language. It'll happen. It doesn't diminish your value that someone else could step into that role. And it's not too late for you to do that. And, you're not serving anyone if you're, not being the most authentic you at the moment. Right. And so that's what I mean by it's called Chapter. And I call it Chapter 2 because usually it's people who've done something for years at a time.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I've seen these people too. And actually it disturbs me when I find somebody that has a passion for something, very good at something. Literally, I'm 23 years old. I can't change my life. Go for it.
I've got jackets older than that. Come on.
My gnome. Come on. But people just, sometimes they don't go for it. They can't see that they're, yes, you have a family, or maybe you have a young family, and you can't throw all your money at it, but you can start. You can do something. You
can do something towards it. Yeah. Until it becomes real in your mind, and if your mind, that they say, if your mind can conceive it, you can achieve it. But you have to prove to yourself, maybe, if you weren't raised that way. At 23, I would have told you to go away.
Yeah.
At 23, I knew what I was going to do till I was 65, right. And the closer I got to 65, the more I realized I don't want to. And listen, here's the thing that I also want people to understand. I loved my job. For 23 of 25 years, I loved my job. And I didn't leave because I was upset, because I definitely could have gone back to doing the trials, I left because I realized it was time to move on. I mean, it's like the house you grew up in. At some point you leave, right? Or you raise kids in. I mean, didn't you guys move recently? Or
Yeah, we just moved. Yeah.
And there's a nostalgia to it, and there's you've got the little marks on the wall of how. Yes, yeah. They do that in Canada? I didn't know if that was just
Yeah, they do that, but it's with icicles.
Great murder weapon, by the way. As a defense lawyer, let me tell you, icicles, they just shh.
Okay.
I'm kidding.
I didn't hear anything.
Okay. All right.
So you mentioned something too that I think is kind of interesting. Bitcoin. Now, didn't you have somebody give you Bitcoin and you lost it?
Okay, no. First off, Bitcoin, I'm cursed when it comes to Bitcoin. I put a great deal of money into a conglomerate, by the way, of computers that were going to mine it, and some guy ran off to Venezuela with all the money. So that was recent. But many years ago, some guy came over from, it was past law school or something. Yeah. And he says, just buy $100. Come on, just buy $100 worth of Bitcoin. And I'm like, fine. And I don't even know. We did it. He did it for me. I got out my credit card, which I think had $100 limit on it at the time. And I bought this Bitcoin, and I had no idea where it is. And it was probably 2000. I don't know. When did it start? It was like 5 or 6 years after it started. I know, it's painful. Listen, this is the way my mind works. I lost $100. I didn't lose whatever it's worth now. I lost 100.
10 or 12 million.
20 million. And it's funny because whenever I have a computer, I either take a sledgehammer to the hard drive or I just keep it. Like I'm never going to return. Like if I'm recycling a computer, I've never, ever given it back with intact. So I've got all these little bits of computers. So I wonder if it's in one of those at some point.
You've also been a consultant on some TV shows, haven't you?
Yeah. So funny thing, when I was 2008 or 9, right around there, I got a kid working for me. Ha ha ha. He came to work for me and he was getting out of TV and wanted to be a mitigation expert, wanted to help people who were on death row who didn't deserve to be on death row. Well, come to find out he had worked in television. Come to find out he was a major bigwig in television. Like, holy cow, major bigwig. I'm not going to tell you who he is, but shows you would 1000% recognize. And he chose big producers wanting to do a legal show. And so he said, oh, yeah, I worked with this lawyer. We did 8 trials in a row and she won every one of them. And I was like, they're like, well, hook us up. So I actually had a real consulting gig on a TV show, which was a blast. I will tell you this right now. If I had known that television writing was a job when I was in college, I never would have gone to law school. I mean, I know it's probably really hard, but when you're the guest in a room of like writers, there's just like food and everyone listening to you and laughing at your jokes and writing down everything. It was so much fun. And then you pull into the studio and you have a pass, and then there's like this sign that says reserved for Elena Saris. It was crazy. And I am, by the way, grew up with a bunch of people who are actors and actresses. I am not a star fucker by any chance, but I will tell you that was fun. That was fun.
You were smitten by Elliot Gould.
Elliot Gould was playing a lawyer and took me out to dinner so that he could talk about it. And I will tell you, he was well, first off, my mother would have, to rest her soul, would have loved that he had taken me. I was just he and I, and he was like the biggest gentleman ever in the history of the world with the most entertaining stories. And I just thought it was wonderful. What I was smitten by was his, here he's this older guy, right? He doesn't really need me to tell him how to do his job, right? And he's taking the time to take me out to dinner. And when we're at a restaurant and people recognize him, he made a point of introducing me as if, it was so like flashback 1950s polite guy, I just loved it. So that was fun. Yeah. And so, but anyway, so I enjoyed it. Number one, I enjoyed it because it was great. It was great fun. It was a world I had never seen the back end of, right? I had just seen the sort of arrogant, narcissistic actor part of it with the people I knew. So it was great. I loved being around writers. I loved being around the creativity. But more than anything, I loved being able to make something authentic. And I recently was called on, not for money, just, hey, I have the show and it's a cop show. I'm not going to tell you which one it is or anything, but they're like, we thought we were woke because we have this diverse cast and we have a very general audience. In other words, they're not like, it's like people that would watch Murder, She Wrote versus people who would watch like Hill Street Blues, right? You can see that like my mom would have watched Murder, She Wrote, but she was not going to watch Hill Street Blues. And so I thought, wow, how impressed I am that you want to get it right with what's going on in the world right now. Like he was basically saying, and he was doing everything right. This guy's doing everything right. But he was basically saying, how can we put little things in the show like this that can relay your experience in the system and, what's been going on? Because I will tell you, I don't care who you voted for. I don't care whether you're Democrat or Republican. I have 25 years experience in Los Angeles in the public defender's office. If you are a black man in Los Angeles, your punishment will be 5 to 10 times higher than any white man for the exact same crime in Los Angeles. I had a friend, I lived through when we had the third strike law in California. Third strike means you had 2 prior felonies. You broke into a garage when you were 18 years old, 2 garages that were attached to the home. That was considered a residential burglary, even though you didn't go in the home. So you're a kid, you're 18 or 19, you steal a bicycle out of one of them and you steal something from inside the car of another one. Now you're 30, you commit a crime. It's a felony. You're looking at 25 years to life. So court has the ability to strike a strike, to be reasonable, to look at the circumstances. They didn't always. Initially, they did not have that ability. So for like a year and a half, I can't remember how long it was. It felt like 10 years, probably only a year and a half. If you got convicted, you went to prison for life. And I had a guy who had a balloon full of heroin, sorry. Heroin full of balloons. That'd be weird. And he got a 6-year offer. And I remember crying with him at a 6-year offer because we were thrilled. We were thrilled at a 6-year offer because I did not want the pressure of losing a trial because the jury was not allowed to be told that it was a 3 strikes law. So they would just be thinking, well, yeah, he had the drug, he's guilty. And he would be going to prison for life. And I watched over and over again white people coming in and their strikes were stricken. Well, that happened when he was 19. You remember the Stanford swimmer. Well, Your Honor, it was one mistake, 20 minutes of his life that he raped a girl and he got 6 months in jail, right? I was asked by a lawyer well after 3 strikes to help his client just with a progress report. In other words, he'd already been convicted. He was coming in. He was a USC student. He was 19 years old. And I was representing a guy. He had 30 pills of Oxycontin. And he was on the street. He was selling them. I mean, he was a homeless guy on the street, black guy, homeless guy. And they arrested my client. They arrested this kid in his dorm room on like a sting with 50 pills or 70 pills, and like 10 were Oxy and the rest were like Adderall or whatever the drugs the kids were using to study, but still illegal without a prescription. They were the same level drug, right? Even though one might be for fun and one might be for studying, they're the same level under the law. He had gotten a year of probation and like community service, and he was coming back to do a fine. And I was just going to help my lawyer friend out and represent him. And my client was looking at 3 years in the state prison for 50 pills of Oxycontin. And this kid comes up to me and he goes, hey man, you got to argue to get out of the fine. I want to have a summer job and I don't want it going all to the court and it's like $400. And I looked at him and I'm like, if I could take you back into lockup right now, I would introduce you to 3 men who did less than what you did, but who aren't white privileged little fucks. Pay your damn fine and sit down. I didn't say that because I was his lawyer, but I argued to the judge, and thankfully the judge said no. But I looked at the lawyer and the lawyer that I had worked in on, and I said, it was everything I could do not to scream at that kid. And this kid believed that he got that because he had a good lawyer. And by the way, he had a good lawyer, but he didn't get that because he had a good lawyer. He had that because he was white. In 1992, I lived in an area of Los Angeles that's known as Hancock Park adjacent. Hancock Park is very fancy. Adjacent means you're too far away to be in that zip code, but the realtor wants to make it look nice. So it was really Koreatown adjacent. I had National Guards on the street after the Rodney King riots. I had a best friend getting married. There was a curfew. It was a very strict curfew. She was getting married in Pasadena, some 15 miles away. Every night I had to drive to Pasadena and drive home. I had a pickup truck that was a hole in the floorboard. It was an old pickup truck. I bought it for $800. It looked like a gardener's truck. I got pulled over 3 nights in a row. 2 nights I got escorted home. 1 night I was 4 blocks away. Cops told me just be safe. That week, the Los Angeles courts, the public defender's office downtown, had to open night court just to process people who had violated curfew, many of whom were not involved in the protest, but were driving home from work. I was pulled over 3 times. I was never even ticketed, much less kept overnight on a curfew violation. And it was because I was white. And I bet you if I was in a Mercedes, I would not have even been stopped. And so when these people call me from TV and want stories and, the verisimilitude of being able to say this happens, this is real. And so just be able to offer up, like, how do we put these little things in these television series so people stop and think, oh yeah, you know what? Like we're going through this thing right now in the States where Confederate generals' statues are being torn down. And people are like, well, we're erasing history. And we're like, we're not erasing a memorial. Statutes aren't there so that people know history. Statutes are there to honor. It's like we have to decide as a country who's going to occupy our public space and who are we going to honor. So Auschwitz still stands in Germany, not as an honor, but so we'll never forget. And you go there and you pay tribute as a memorial. But you don't see statues of Eichmann and Mengele there. You don't see Nazi generals lining the streets of Berlin. And so there's a difference. Like, little things like people don't think that far ahead. Like, how is this going to look to someone who was violated by this person? How is this going to look to someone who was tormented by this society? I mean, the whole Confederacy was based on the fact that these generals were going to war so that they could have a society completely based on the policy of white supremacy and owning other human beings. Like, I'm not troubled that these are coming down. I wish they had never been put up. And it doesn't mean we don't have little placards and talk, hey, on this battleground, this is what happened. or this place where you can go and visit. We don't tear apart history books. We talk about it. But every emblem of Nazi, significance was taken out of Berlin for a reason. And so that's really getting political, as if to say, though, that there are things that I have access to, stories and little tidbits that we could put into programs like this, not as propaganda, but as saying, hey, I just want you to stop and think. And look, you might disagree with me after you stop and think, but I just want you to stop and think. When you see two kids, age 12 walking through a park, one black and one white, and a police officer comes up and a white one wants to wave and say hi, and the black one gets on his knees and puts his hands in his air. That's powerful shit. I mean, that's saying, look, this is, whether you agree with his reaction, that's his thought, like we all have different thoughts. Like, you're a guy, you're a big guy. You never walked home at night from a bar wondering probably if you were going to get attacked. That's your reality. It's not racist, sexist, anything. It's just, that's your reality. My reality is different, right? I'm 5'4". I look when I walk out of a bar at night, even when I'm not drunk. I look, obviously I'm not walking home to drive if I'm drunk, but I look when I'm in a parking structure in the middle of the day. And, it's just, that's my reality. But you may not think that. You may not, think, wow, you know what? I mean, you're listening to this podcast right now. When was the last time you thought, as you walked in a parking structure, you literally stopped in a parking structure and say, this is weird. I'm walking through a parking structure to get my car. And I am not looking behind poles, and I'm not looking to see if anyone's hiding in the car. And there's not a parking structure I walk in where I don't look. Right. And so I just want people to think about it. I just want people to sort of put themselves in someone else's shoes.
No, that's great. I didn't think we'd be going down that road.
That was a little much. Yeah. I'm sorry.
So I do have to know. So if you were assigned to Suge Knight, would he be out?
No, I tell you, I didn't know Suge. Suge was funny. Suge got a good deal. Let me put it that way. I think Suge got a good deal. Suge had a problem because he had a crime that was a crime of violence that was caught on tape, and there was a backstory to it, but he also had 3 strikes. So even if he had 2 strikes prior, so had he won the underlying crime but got convicted of something lesser, he still could have been facing life in prison. So remember I talked about the guy with the heroin in the balloon. It's a different scale, but it's the same idea. I might be able to argue that it wasn't yours, but man, are you willing to risk life on it?
Yeah. Now, I'm just kind of curious because you bring up the 3 strikes, and I was around when all this was happening. When did that go away? And the people that were put into prison because of 3 strikes, what's happened to that?
Okay, I can't tell you dates because it's been a while, but yeah. It's been at least 10 years. So what happened was originally there was nothing. It's called the Romero motion now, or initially, where you could argue to the court, hey, let's not consider these strikes because the guy was too long ago or they weren't violent, blah, blah, blah. First couple years, you didn't have that. It was strict. You did it, you're gone. Then we had the motion where we could argue. Okay, at least you had a shot at arguing. Then we had the law that said, listen, this is ridiculous. The 3rd strike has to be serious or violent. That's when it changed. So we still have the 3 strikes law, but the 3rd thing you've done is not stealing a piece of pizza off a table from a kid on Santa Monica Pier, which was the big classic case. Right. And for the people that had been imprisoned prior to that, we went back to every single one of those cases, and they had the opportunity to have their case re-litigated. And it was pretty easy. And like even now, there's new laws that are changing. Any law that benefits a defendant is retroactive. Any law that punishes a defendant is only forward thinking. So like, for instance, the reason Charles Manson wasn't on death row, even though he was convicted and given the death penalty, is because the death penalty was outlawed in 1976 in California. So at that point, everybody on death row sentence been commuted. Death penalty has subsequently been reestablished, but you can't go back and give those folks the death penalty. It's only people from that day forward.
Oh, okay. I did.
Yeah. So we do have some less than other draconian laws, but yes. So now we still do have the 3 strikes, but the last crime has to be violent or serious. It can't be something as minor.
So I didn't want to go down this path. I didn't even think we'd go down it, but I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are regarding prisoners. Now it could be anything, but if they're in segregation for 23 hours a day, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's awful. I don't see it too often in terms of full segregation, only because we have overcrowding. We have so much overcrowding. We have, prison cells that were built for 2 that now house 6. We have dorms that were built for 30 that house 100. I mean, COVID is showing us how crowded the jails are. I think that, and I'm hoping that we rethink incarceration in general for a lot of offenses. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, it makes a lot of sense for, some very violent offenders. But I will tell you, when I was in law school, my car got stolen, and it was financially devastating for me. It was a car that I had paid like $800 for, and it got me to and from work, it got me to and from school, and I lost it. I couldn't get to and from work. I had to take a bike to school, and if they had caught the guy who did it and they were going to put him in jail for 30 days, how would that have made me whole? I would so much rather say, hey, you stole a car. Every Saturday you're working until this is paid off. We are so quick to put people in jail, especially people of color. I mean, if you look at the makeup of our prisons versus the makeup of society, it's absolutely ridiculous. And I'll tell you another scary statistic. The largest overnight houser of mentally ill people in the country is the LA County Jail. And we're not equipped.
I can't believe that. Yeah. And you think about addiction.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we're getting smarter. We're getting better with addiction in the courts. I will say this. We are getting better. We're not perfect, but we have drug court. We have in-house, you're in a jail, but you're in a treatment center. We're learning. And I will tell you, you want to know why we're learning? Because we were getting a lot of people who were opiate addicted, and opiate addicted tend to be white people. No one gave a flying rat's ass when it was crack, and I'm happy to see the change. I'm sorry it came as a result of, people that look like the judges that were getting pulled into this, and also socioeconomically, addiction, crosses all barriers.
Right.
And I mean, just the punishment for crack versus the punishment of cocaine. What is the difference? I mean, what are we? So to your point about solitary or pseudo solitary confinement, I don't think it's healthy. I can think of very, very limited circumstances where it might be necessary. Like if someone were to have committed horrific violent crimes and then more violent crimes in the jail, maybe we're going to be talking about limiting contact with other people. But I still, I mean, it's, I don't believe in the death penalty. I just, who are we to say God is done? I can't, I'm not, not my choice, not your choice. So I think we have to start sort of reassessing, people talking about like defunding the police, which is such a horrible expression for, hey, you know what, if it's a mental illness situation, like people are posting if you guys have this phenomenon, like Karens that are calling the police that there's a black man sitting in the park, he must be bad. You look at these people.
I haven't heard of that.
Oh yeah, they call them Karens. And fully 50% are probably just racist people who don't want to see a black person in their park, but fully 50% are mentally ill. And you can tell by watching the exchange that they're mentally ill. And, I've talked to cops who come into court and they're like, I don't want to be called out for these things. So it's not a matter of just taking all your money away, but it's like, you don't need a tank and military armor to be a police of any major large city. Why don't we use those funds to get a mental health worker to go out to you or have a mental health worker on call? I'm on call when I worked at the public defender's office in case you got arrested in the middle of the night to come to the jail and say, hey, don't talk to anybody. So, we can pay mental health workers to be on call and the cop can say, listen, I'm talking to this guy and he's not understanding me. And rather than doing what I normally do, which is just talk louder, maybe you can come and help me de-escalate this or find the language of your profession and expertise that can scale this down before it leads to something else. And I think that now, like when the dust settles and it's, the pendulum is swinging and things are crazy. But when it settles, I think we are going to start rethinking incarceration and rethinking solitary confinement.
It's so overdue. So overdue. I would love to have you back on a podcast with a few other people and all different areas, right? So people who believe, anyways, it would be awesome to be able to have another podcast about this because I'm very opinionated when it comes to that side. And I've never been to jail. I've never been to prison, but I do know a lot of people that have. And
I will tell you this, I have nothing but the utmost respect for most police. And I think that sets me a little bit apart in terms of being a true believer as a public defender. I've dated a couple, but Mostly it's like, look, I get it. When the bullets fly, you're running towards them, and you should want this as much as I want this. And I have had, I once, it was funny, there's all these surveillance back in the day of crack where, there'd be 3 undercover police officers down on the street level, 1 in the park doing the controlled buy, 2 people in a van in case he ran, and then somebody taking photographs in a apartment window, and be like 10 people to get a homeless guy with 5 rocks. And we'd be like, well, how many rapes happened that day? How many, but this was their thing. They were going to clean up downtown. And I remember one time they got this incredible picture of my client handing the guy money and the guy handing him the rock. And, and the cop comes up and he goes, this is going to ruin your day. I'm like, this makes my day. It's like, you did what you're supposed to do. My guy, my guy goes, oh yeah, I'm fucked. What are they giving me? I mean, that's fine. That doesn't bother me at all. That's good police work. I think it's, a weird allocation of funds and time. But, think about what's happening now. I mean, Black men who are unarmed are still getting killed, even though the police know they're being filmed. It's like, really? Like, you can't even behave during this? Like, you're being filmed. Like, I just think to myself, imagine what it would have been like and I have no way to understand this. Don't get me wrong. But 1992, there weren't cell phones. There weren't, a proliferation of video cams. And this guy named George Halliday just happened to have a video camera looking out his window, and he catches the beating of Rodney King. And I just try and put myself in that position, which again, as a white person, what my job is right now to do is shut up and listen. But to the extent that I can express this to another white person, like, can you imagine watching that on TV as a Black man going, finally, it's over. It's over. They see it now. It's on freaking tape. It's on the television. We're going to be good. It's not going to happen again. And here we are 30 years later. And it's not only happening and happening and happening, it's happening while we're protesting it happening. And I just think, my God, if now is not the time for us to shut up and listen, when is, and even me with the experience that I have, I know full well, I have no idea what it is like, and I can't even conceive of it, but I do know it's different. And I do accept my role in not doing more sooner and not raising the alarm sooner, even though I feel like I've done a lot. Apparently it wasn't enough, because if we all had done enough, maybe we wouldn't be here. I mean, now you sort of get a sense of where my world has been, like how much relief I have when my only decision for a day is, am I going to lose $1,000 on this ad, or am I going to make $1,000 on this ad?
Right.
Can I help somebody learn how to make money online? That is when I say I'm soul weary. That's what I mean by it. And I still feel a little bit of guilt, like not being at the forefront of this battle.
And I can see that. I can see you having that guilt because you've had to leave, knowing you. But
having the influence now to be able to talk to television producers and
yes.
do that, I mean, to me, frankly, if I think about it logically, that is going to be more impactful than dealing with that one person in that one court that one day. And so that's what I feel like. I have to remember, I'm not doing it instead. I'm doing it as an extension of the journey I've always been on.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get off this hardcore subject.
All right, let's get back to the good stuff.
All right. So tell us, I'm just kind of curious what you would consider to be your biggest success.
I think, well, certainly saving the lives of the people that were wrongfully accused in trial. I have had several of those successes. And I will tell you that in my first 2 years of practicing, I had a guy who was accused of something, and it's a long story again, but he absolutely didn't do it. And it was a misdemeanor, and he would have gotten no time in jail and probation, but he would have lost his nursing license. And all he ever wanted to do was be a nurse, and fully 40% of my clients were doing what I call life on the installment plan. It was a game. They're going to rob here, do their time. I'm going to try and rob this and, do this and do my time. And they were robbers. That's what they did. And the people whose lives are impacted most by some of these crimes are misdemeanors. You lose your job, you lose your right to, you have to put that on your application sometimes. You lose your license. You could lose a nursing license. And winning that case to me felt like saving a life, really early on, right? Because obviously they didn't give me a murder case in the first year. So
right.
I feel like those are my biggest successes. And I think also being sort of a role model for the women in my office, because I'm not that old, but I definitely was one of the, trailblazers of, you can be an aggressive, assertive, confident woman and still care about your client, like in the nurturing sense, And so rather than having like this, oh, I feel like their mom, it's more like I feel like the mother bear. Like, I might have that nurturing sense, but come near my client with something wrong and I will fuck with you. Like I will make your life miserable. There was not a DA in the county who wanted to be in trial with me because I was a stone cold bitch on purpose. Like I don't want you to have a pleasant experience with me in this case. That I want you to worry about that, and I want you to make me an offer that will alleviate you of that. and so I think that's probably what I'm most proud of is giving that to the younger generation, And then certainly originally it was women, and then later on, there was this sort of, lull of a certain generation where people weren't passionate, and being able to show as a 24-year veteran in the office, you can be passionate about this every day and go in and save people's lives.
Really?
And I think, yeah. And I want to bring that to what I do now. Like I want to be as passionate about, you can change your life. You can do whatever it was you always thought about doing, or you have the hankering to do, even though it's not your current circumstance. You can find a way to do that.
Well, I saw you talk on a call the other night, and you had a ton of people interested in doing what you're doing. And, some of those people have been involved with a losing struggle, in this, we're talking Amazon, and just listening to you in the way that you were talking with passion. And again, you're the storyteller, but you got so many people excited about what you can do. It's not just one thing in e-com. You can do these other things. Open up your bloody mind.
Right.
Yeah.
So many people think I can't go online and teach people how to do something because I don't know something. And I'm like, I guarantee you know something. I guarantee you're an expert at something that you don't even think of. It's so part of your daily life that you take it for granted. But for me, it's like, you come to my house or I just, you cook dinner. I'd be like, say, what? I had put the fire alarm out twice making a frozen pizza since the lockdown. All right. I actually, my homeowners association called me and they're like, have you considered food delivery? I'm like, I don't. So, I mean, just, something as silly as that, or somehow you were, I don't know, there's 100 million things that you may know that people are willing to pay you to learn, and there's 100 million skills you have that will translate into something else.
Exactly.
And we're so handcuffed by the way we've been raised to think that this is what we're supposed to do, or this is what we have to do. It doesn't mean we be irresponsible. It just means we, like you said, open your mind to other possibilities.
Right.
Yeah. We don't have to burn the ships right now, but let's nudge them out into the water a little.
So let's turn it around. So what are some of your biggest struggles?
My biggest struggle was definitely in changing was the mindset about the wealth, like I talked about, like just understanding that you can be a responsible rich person who's not a jerk. Number one. Number two, thinking I knew a lot because I was really successful in one field, like not really understanding I had to start all over again. That was an arrogance that I got, definitely my bank account got slapped for. And I think probably work-life balance. I still struggle with that. Yeah, I do. I feel like I have to get this done and then that. Like I have this sort of, I'm going to do this, I'm going to buy my house, and then I'm going to start like, really going out on dates or really going out to parties or really going out, rather than you can do it a little bit all at the same time. Yeah.
So you don't, you're not a type of person to sit back at the end of the day and just relax?
I do sit back at the end. Yes, no. Self-care, I have found a very good balance for. I'm talking about like, relationships.
Right.
Which is as far as I'll take it with you. That's it. That's all we're talking about. But just relationships, like getting, doing that, like going out where places where people that are going to have the same interest in meeting those people. I'm far more inclined to get a book because and then I'll tell because I'm busy or I'm going to get up early and place my ads today or something, So that's a struggle for me right now. People don't believe this, but I am at heart mostly an introvert. I will get out and I will be the life of the party and the center of attention, but I will need 2 days.
No way.
Yes, I will need 2 days. But I'll tell you.
There's no way that you're an introvert.
I am a little bit of an introvert.
Are you serious?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, here on lockdown, I have a significant, my friends are significantly older. Like I just got in with a group of friends when I was in my 30s and 40s who were in their 50s and 60s, and it was fine. Now I'm in my, and they're in their 80s. And so I'm very careful about COVID. I very much isolate. When I go to court, I won't go out for 2 weeks so that I can go and see them in the backyard. Now, I don't want to, I'm not, if I go to the grocery store, it's one thing, but court, places like that, like, I'm very careful because of the older generation of people that I hang out with. I want to be very, very, very careful around that. So I've been alone and sort of solitary for a while. And I'm thinking, but yet my remedy for that is tomorrow I'm going down to Torrey Pines Lodge and just being alone in solitude, but in nature. So it's like, I need something, and even just like interaction with the hotel staff. That's something I don't really get right now with what's going on. We're loosening it up a little bit. I mean, California's getting hit with COVID, but for me personally, I take an extra, responsibility because of the age group of the people, and because I have been going to court. So now I don't have court. So it's a real, it's a real treat for me to go into someone's backyard and have a glass of wine now. I mean, it's a big deal because for 2 full months, I was really strict, really, really strict.
All right, Elena. So at the end of every episode, we have one question for our guest. And that is, do you know a guy?
I know a lot of guys. I got a Rolodex here. So if you don't want to narrow the topic, I'll just give you the most recency, just the fellow I talked to just before getting onto this podcast. And that is Todd Snively, who I think you met at the same place you met me. I don't know if you met him. Very successful entrepreneur, been at the highest heights and the lowest lows, and just a fascinating story of loss and redemption and perseverance, and a very genuine willingness to help people, and a desire to see them successful. You remember if we go back about an hour or two ago? Okay.
We talked about an event that we were at where you were calling people from a bar.
Yes.
That was Todd. So,
there it is.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go.
Oh, that'll be awesome.
I probably was looking for the most successful seller I knew at the event, and he would have been that. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's really cool. I'll reach out to him and see when we can schedule him in. So, my friend,
it's been fun. Thank you.
It has been a hoot, and I really hope that we can get together again and meet at these events. And I really can't wait to get to one of your networking parties again. They are the best.
Thank you. I can't wait to have one again. I miss them.
Are you still going to get me my Coke Zeros?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, thank you so much.
Oh, yeah. On me, mister. Drinks on me. Very easy.
Fantastic. Anyway, Elena, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks. Take care, guys.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Well, that's it for our interview with Elena Saris. Make sure to tune in next time where we interview Kevin King, aka the King of Amazon. We end up discussing his travels, a run-in with the mob, and even a tiger attack story. So make sure to tune in. You don't want to miss this one. As always, make sure to like and share the podcast. It really helps us out. We're always looking to grow our audience, and the best way to do that is by word of mouth. So every time you share it, an angel gets its wings. That's not true, but it does help us reach a new set of ears. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.